Welcome to the To The Point podcast. Now here's your host for To The Point, John Brake.
All right, you're listening to Season 1, Episode 2 of To The Point podcast. Today, we're just going to be talking about mentorship. First, I want to just tell you, I'm John.
I'm Kelly.
And I'm Dwayne.
Yeah, we've got a guest with us today. That's awesome. I'm going to let Kelly kind of introduce Dwayne, and then we're going to jump right into this conversation. So thanks for joining us.
So this whole conversation is very near and dear to my heart. It's been such a huge piece of my personal development. And Dwayne is he's who I turn to. He's my mentor. Another term that is often used is spiritual father, which is it's a biblical term, so it shouldn't weird us out too much. Paul was a spiritual father to Timothy. But kind of the way that Dwayne and I met is interesting because I'm a pastor, and so people say, well, how did you and Dwayne connect? And I go, well, we met at this bar in St. Louis and people look at me funny, but yeah, we went up there to discuss, these testimony books. So we put one out, the Unbroken book, and that's where we went to kind of hear the idea and how that could fit into what we do. And right there in the middle of the Blue Oyster Bar, the weirdest, most eclectic bar / grill restaurant, wherever, what you call that place, I don't know, I've ever been to, but there was an immediate connection, immediate heart connection. Right. You just knew from that moment on, whether we do this book or not, I'm going to be talking to that guy.
Right. There's something there. Something
powerful there. Yeah. And for me, it was just such a huge, because I was looking for that in my life. I've been praying for that kind of person. I was not expecting that at that meeting. I was expecting to hear a pitch about a book.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting anything more, but God provided something that was really beyond all my expectations.
And I feel like that's when God moves the best, when we see it, when we least expect it. We see it from these strange encounters at these weird places that we never thought that we would have a moment like that. I feel like that's when he hits us the hardest with that kind of truth and love in our life. So that's awesome.
Now, I'm not advocating you go trying to find a mentor at the bar, right? I mean, that's
right. Let's be clear.
It's a pretty rare bar find to find an awesome pastor to pour your life in, his life into you.
At
least in my experience, he might pour something out for you, but it may not be the spirit. It might be spirits.
Spirits. There is a difference. There is.
So Dwayne is a huge part of my life. Number one, we talk pretty much on a weekly basis.
Right.
And that's one of the things, we'll talk, how does this work? And one of the things you have to carve time out for that, and I think it's so important that we prioritize the things that matter the most to us. We all have the same amount of time in life, and the things that get done are the things that we choose to get done.
Right.
And whether you want to believe that about yourself or not, that's the reality that we can't escape.
Right.
And so we find time to connect, and that's such an important thing for me that I actually put it in my calendar. And Dwayne travels and does a lot of really awesome stuff. He's a part of Destiny Fellowship, and I'm one of many pastors that I have the privilege of having Dwayne pour into my life. We find that time because it is important, and it's something that we give ourselves to. But Dwayne's somebody that he's going to speak at United Night. He's done it several times. He's also on our executive team at church, and so he's very deep in the life of LifePoint because he's deep in my life as well. So huge. So
very good.
Glad to have you with us today, Dwayne.
It's a joy to be here, man. Always a joy to be with Kelly and John. You're new, a relationship to me, but I'm just so grateful to be a part of your life as well, and all of those that are listening, and for LifePoint. And it's a joy to be a part of the kingdom and part of God's idea, of the church. What a joy.
And I'm thankful for both of you guys. I mean, I'm new to kind of this whole world. I'm definitely new to LifePoint, and so I'm just thankful to have two people to be able to kind of bounce things off of and to speak into my life in a different way, kind of further down the road that I'm on right now. So it's really a blessing and an honor to be doing ministry with you guys. So thank you very much for being a part of my life, both of you.
It's a joy.
But I was taking a look at your blog, Kelly, kellyrhoades.com. I'll plug that there if you want to go check that out. But we can actually put links to these blog posts in the show notes. I think that would be a good way for everybody to check these out for themselves. But we had two blogs that I read about mentorship. There may have been some more on there, but 5 keys to finding a good mentor and maximizing mentor relationships. I thought that it would be cool to kind of go through the flow. There were the 5 keys to finding a good mentor, and kind of throw each one of those out and talk a little bit about that and what that looks like from the different levels of mentorship that we have just with us 3 sitting right here. So I can kind of give a quick overview of those. Realize that at least in some small way, everyone is a mentor. That's the first point. Realize that since everyone can be a mentor, you have to be selective with those you walk closely with. Realize that you need to ask is point number 3 on that, one of the 5 key ways to find a good mentor. Number 4 is realize that some of the best mentors in the history of the world are available to you anytime you need them. And then realize that the best mentors are gifts from God. So we can talk about each one of those, and we can, I'm sure we'll veer off into wherever we end up, but I think that's a good kind of framework for the conversation. So where do you want to start?
The very first one, you realize that really everybody can be at some level a mentor. I think it really speaks to what I believe is an essential aspect of the mentor-mentee relationship, spiritual father, spiritual son relationship, and that is an attitude of humility that says, I can learn from anyone. That I am not at a place or at a level where I can't learn something from. It's something powerful. I mean, particularly as a parent, I kind of use this as a frame because it's such a big part of my life. But when I think about my 9-year-old, she's 9 years old. What possibly could she teach me? Well, she teaches me things all the time. Yeah. She helps me see the things that I overlook. She has a perspective that I simply don't have. She's 9. She's a girl. And she sees things with that. My 11-year-old son, he has this big, beautiful brain, and he's so creative, and he sees things and possibilities that I've given up a long time ago. So he breathes, freshness into me on a regular basis. And so, my daughter, she's probably name all 4, right? Because somebody's going to get left out. My daughter, and she is, she's 13 years old, about soon to be 14, and she's so strong in her spirit. There's things that I can learn from her. And then my oldest is just absolutely so dedicated. And what does this look like? And to see him push through and overcome things. I mean, I learn from all of my children. Now, you're supposed to be teaching your kids things, but I believe they have lessons that we can learn through them. Right. Now, they don't need to hear it from you all the time because then they'll get a big head, right? But at the same time, my grandpa passed away last November, and he was well into his 90s. And he had perspectives that I simply don't have. He lived through the Great Depression. Right. He was a pastor for over 50 years, and yet he still found freshness in the Word. I mean, so these are things. Sometimes we can get to this place where we have this perspective that, hey, I've had this experience, I have this education, I have this whatever, and we think, well, there's really nothing I can learn from this person, this guy, this gal. But at the same time, that attitude is exactly what prevents you from learning from that person.
Exactly.
Right? And if you can't be taught, it's difficult to grow.
And on this end of parenthood, just speaking about that, it's really easy to see, like, okay, yeah, I see that wisdom coming from my son or my daughter. That's so crazy. Like I haven't even thought about that since I was 6 years old or since I was 4 years old. It's really easy to see it from that way. But the other side of that, developing that in your children, to seek that out from the adults in their lives, from whatever you can somehow, by the grace of God, give to them. I realized that was part of me moving back to Lebanon, was realizing that my mom had only seen my daughter 3 times since she was born, and if there was anything I could do to get them together, to get my family closer together, to learn, to grow. Sure. And I read an article, a Wait But Why article, about how by the time we're 18, we've spent 85% or something of our one-on-one time with our parents that we'll ever get, because we're there and we don't even know we should be taking advantage of that time before it's gone. Right. And then to have if you have an opportunity to glean any sort of wisdom or have those types of conversations, then I think you should 100% take them.
It's very good. Great.
So you said that something to that effect in that blog. There is tremendous value in everyone's experience. It doesn't matter where they've been. It doesn't matter where they're going, what's happening. what you can get from the value that you can get from just their experience is a huge add to your life, no matter what.
Oh, yeah. And honestly, there's a lot of things we can learn from people who've messed up a bunch.
Absolutely.
I'm a middle child, so it's a benefit to me to learn from what my brother messed up with.
I'm the baby, so it was sort of that.
So you have like twice the education I had, right?
Yep.
But there's a beautiful thing there to be able to say, because you made the mistake, I don't have to. And there's something really also, if you've made the mistake, why would you want someone else to make that mistake? Mm-hmm. So being able to pour in from your experience and how that's learned. I think that's the essential piece to kind of a very general understanding of what the mentor relationship looks like. But really, at some level, if you really want to grow and really want to have these types of relationships, you have to move beyond that. I can learn from everybody thing. You should always maintain it, but to find somebody that you walk with in a much deeper, more personal relationship.
It's keep an openness to what you can learn from people, but also understand that to do some necessary growing and to make some necessary changes, you have to filter that through people that have been down that path or that have a particular skill set or wisdom or a set of experiences that can help you along that particular path.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's really, really important. We live in such a single generation thought process with a lot of us. We live in America. One of our big challenges, I think, is our Declaration of Independence. It's deep in us, right?
Right.
And we love it. Yes, we are, the sovereign nation, and we're so grateful for that. But we get really independent in our thinking. Most people think today, what I do only affects me. But the reality is, when I woke up to realize, no, with my children, I can teach them what I know, but I'll reproduce who I am. Right.
Absolutely
and the scripture says, right?
That's big. Say that again.
I can teach them what I know, but I'll reproduce who I am.
Right.
So I may be teaching them one thing. I'm teaching them faith, for instance, but I'm functioning in fear.
Right.
Well, they're going to gather and reproduce the fear more than the faith, whatever that is, right?
And most of the time, they're gonna see what you do as opposed to what you say.
Completely.
They're going to latch onto that, and that's going to, like you said, that's going to reproduce in the lives of the people that you are.
Your actions always speak louder than your words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Always. And when I recognize the power of that DNA, whether it's biological and or spiritual, that is a huge thing, then I also began to realize that we need to be connected generationally. I was basically without a father. Now, a biological father. My dad's a great guy, been through his own stuff, but was absent, backslidden away from the work of Christ as a disciple of Christ until I became a pastor. So I needed, I was pastoring the day he came home, came back to Christ. So, but I needed somebody. And so for me, that journey began in my basic day of devotion. I was reading in Corinthians one day, in 1 Corinthians 4, verse 15, where Paul says, though you have 10,000 instructors in Christ, yet you do not have many fathers. And then he just zeroed it down. He said, I am your father.
Wow.
I have begotten you. So Paul got really real with them. And that verse became alive to me. And I realized, God, I don't have a spiritual father. And I began a journey.
Right. And that's why, that the second part of that piece is all about, there's all these different places you can learn from. You need to be selective.
Very much so.
And, one of the things that this happens quite regularly is that I will run into somebody who wants to take a step in faith. They want to grow in faith, and they will say, well, I'm struggling because I read this book. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling because I talked to this person.
Yeah.
And the question that I just always have kind of floating in the back of my mind is, did you know that book was probably going to take you somewhere you didn't want to go?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And so it's like the guy who wonders why he questions his faith when he reads a lot of books attacking the faith.
Right.
Not that we shouldn't have an understanding of what some of those arguments are. I'm not saying that. I'm very widely read. Okay. But whatever you're trying to grow and develop into something, you're going to become what you spend your time pursuing.
That's right.
Right. Yes. I mean, that's a spiritual law. It's a principle.
Absolutely.
And when we pursue Christ, guess what? We get the attitude and mind of Christ.
Yeah. That's why we're told to seek Him first.
Exactly.
On everything.
Exactly. That's part of love first. We love Him first.
Exactly.
Give glory to God. That's what that's about.
That's very
but So when you're looking for this person in your life, there's a lot of things you can look for. You can look at for success. Well, guess what? There's a lot of wealthy people that have all the money in the world that they could ever want, the nicest house and nicest cars, and they would die to have children that respected them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you really kind of have to have an idea of what it is you're looking for. Yeah. And I think that's a really important piece is how do you select that person? How do you do that? I've kind of got my own ideas there. For me, I've had many mentors in my life, and I think that that's good.
Yes,
because we grow through different stages.
Right.
Some people are, I believe, God puts in our life for a season, and sometimes that season is shorter than others.
Yeah,
right. So some relationships are for a lifetime. Some relationships are for a moment. So for me, the big key is prayer. I knew as a young man, I needed those relationships. I needed to have someone that could pour into me. I craved it. And so I began to pray, God, will you show me? I had some tremendous coaches in my life that I turned towards mentors, and some tremendous teachers and kind of coaches and teachers are naturally in that place.
Right.
I came to Christ at a junior high in an FCA meeting, and so Coach Mike Palmer and Greg Taunt, biology teacher, those were guys that were essential. Yeah. My church didn't have a youth pastor. We had a youth leader, and that was great, but we didn't have a youth pastor. And those guys, I was seeing them every day in the school. Right. And so they had a huge impact in my life and my initial discipleship. But then as I grew and as I came to know at a deeper level and understand the call God had on my life, I needed to be connected with some other people.
Right.
And so I began to pray, God, connect me. Lord, I need somebody, help me. And he revealed some of those folks to me. And I think that's the first step. If you're looking to find someone, I think you need to, if you want God's will and God's blessing, you probably ought to seek him in the whole process.
And I think that somewhat like seeking out the right person, sometimes it's just having the awareness to know that person's been there this whole time.
A lot of times,
Sometimes when you pray through that and you ask God to reveal, he might just reveal the guy sitting next to you. Oh wow, that's the relationship that's been there, and then it's just about deepening that and maybe further defining that or whatever that looks like. But you had that Ed Young quote, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future."
Right.
In that article, I think that's a huge part of this too, to understand that just the people that you surround yourself with have an impact on either who will be your mentor or what kind of mentee you'll be.
Right.
What kind of mentor you'll be. I hear this all the time from different people. You are the average of the 5 people you're around the most. Some version of that I hear all the time, and I think it's really important to understand what it means to you, to your character, to who you are when you pursue those types of relationships. Look ahead to where you want to be. What kind of future that you want to have. Right. Some of that stuff is right there with you. Some of that stuff is stuff that you have to actually go out of your comfort zone and seek out a little bit.
And I think that's a really big point. So Kelly says when we met at the bar, he was praying for a mentor, a spiritual father. See, what he may not have known prior to that is I was praying, God, it has made such a difference in my life. My life was transformed completely when I met and connected with my spiritual father.
Right.
And so I realized, God, I want to be that for somebody. So my prayer was on the other side of that coin. God, show me the sons you have for me.
Right.
And so this thing was, so it was born in the realm of the spirit, not just, I'm looking for someone. I'm looking for who is God identifying.
What seemed like a random, weird choice encounter was something that God had been orchestrating to make happen all along.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is a huge piece of that.
It's a huge piece of that.
Another person that is in your life is Eddie Jones, my good friend too.
Yeah.
And Eddie's the one who invited me to go up to the book club meeting. And, the kingdom of God advances at the speed of relationship, to quote another spiritual father for both of us, Tony Miller.
Tony Miller, absolutely.
One of the greatest leaders I've ever met, but that relationship is the huge part of the key. And we could even talk about this because we're talking about mentorship and spiritual fatherhood, but that's not the only thing we need. And I think one of the great places that we lack today in the churches is not just having people we can look up to and learn from. It's having brothers who can go through stuff with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's just such a tremendous break in this idea that we go it alone. I think some of it is just natural, but it's also kind of the product of our privacy fence Facebook culture.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Absolutely.
we present the thing we want everyone to see, but it's, hey, I went to the beach with my family for vacation. We went and saw this movie. We got to go to this game or whatever it is that we had a chance to do, this concert. But the real struggles, that's difficult for us to really voice or even admit to sometimes. And really, we need people to be able to get down the ditch with us.
We do.
A brother is born for adversity.
That's what the scripture says. Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes I think we feel like maybe if we even admit that there's adversity in our lives, that somehow it reveals weakness.
And I think you're right. I think that's the feeling, but exactly the opposite is true.
Yeah.
It takes the strong person, and you began this thing talking about humility.
Right.
It takes that strong person that says, I'm going to be vulnerable. Here is my life.
Right.
Here I am. But their identity is clearly in Christ, not in a title, not in a position or accolades, right? Or accomplishments. My identity is in Christ, and I've really struggled with this.
Right.
And that, I think, is a big issue, because if I don't know who I am, if I'm insecure, or which often can tie to a pride or an arrogance, then I'm going to put my best facade forward. Mm-hmm. And so really I'm dying on the inside.
Right.
I'm very isolated. I've met so many pastors that would say, I have no friends. And most pastors, if they had a friend, they would do better. Because they often can't even trust others because they haven't got into the trenches with them. They're in competition, which is completely out of line biblically. We are in completion with one another, not in competition, right? And so we got to get past that.
That even plays out like in church attendance statistics. I've heard you talk about what's the percentage of people that would go to church if they were just asked.
It's like 89%, according to, I think it's Barna put that research out a few years ago.
If we just put ourselves out there, who knows what's on the other side of that conversation?
Absolutely.
I was telling you earlier about the conversation I had with somebody. I was going through some stuff. I decided, hey, anytime anybody asks, I'm just going to tell them the truth. You get kind of blindsided by that when you're on the receiving end of that. But you put that out there, and by the end of that, me just sort of just kind of dumping all that out, they basically said that they're going through a similar situation. There was such growth and connection and beauty in just that one conversation where I just leaned into just putting myself out there to know, okay, hey, we don't have to go it alone. A lot of times we think that there's nobody's going through this. Nobody's going to want to hear my sob story or whatever. Most of the time, on the other end of that is they're going through something similar. Right. How we can help each other now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
And I think that just has to be, there's the yes face we put on, so to speak, the invitation, that I am approachable and I'm being just very authentic. Now, I can't get up and, if I'm pastoring and unload all my cares. I can't bleed on the sheep or they won't come back next Sunday, right? So you choose where you're going to be connected. But I can sit down with that brother and say, here's what's going on in my life right now. Right. Here's my struggle right now.
But it's not just pastors that can't bleed on the sheep either. Sometimes, and it really is let's just be honest, it's a character flaw. All we can do is talk about our problems.
So true. Yeah.
And when we become that person, whether we're a pastor or anybody, we automatically begin to build barriers in our life from the people we need the most, because we can't find anything good. It's like, if we can't be happy, that's where our real happiness lies. Like, I am just thrilled to be miserable. There's sometimes, and you know what, that's not just a specific kind of person. We can all kind of get in that place if we're not careful, but it's something we have to guard our hearts against.
There's always a fine line to walk with how you're approaching, how you share, and how you help someone through that, because there's also, on the opposite of that, there's a lot of people who, in hearing that, just want to commiserate with you, just want to tell you, oh yeah,
misery loves company.
That's terrible. And then and then I've noticed that I've had people in situations in my life where I thought something was totally awesome until I heard what somebody else's perspective was on it. And then it totally altered my view of it. And it made me think, oh, that wasn't that great. That guy did that, and I didn't even notice that before, but man, that's terrible. Otherwise, I would have always went through life thinking that was a great, and there's something, like I said, it's a fine line. There's something to be said about learning to see it from the right lens, but also to not just go so far on the other side where the pendulum swings the other way and all of a sudden it's all negative all the time.
But at the same time, and I don't want to, you have something important to say probably, but this I think is such an important thing. If you have somebody in your life that you want to pour into your life on any issue, whatever it is, you have to be willing not only to be humble, but to be honest.
Yeah.
I cannot help you with your secret problem.
Right.
Maybe I can if you tell me.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd say, yeah, I struggle with that too.
Right.
Or maybe I could say, well, this is what so-and-so did to go through that. But if we don't know, you know, we have to be honest about, hey, I've got this. I've got this thing I'm dealing with, and I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not necessarily bleeding on the sheep or anything. That's just like, hey, I've got to be clear. I mean, I've had many conversations with you, like, all right, Dwayne, I just have to tell you this. This is maybe not the most pastoral thing, but this is the way I feel.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you have to. We need somebody like that in our lives.
Yes.
You know, that we can just be completely unfiltered with.
Absolutely.
Well, that's biblical fellowship too. I mean, we think of fellowship as, you know, breaking the bread, just hanging out, having a good time,
Right.
everything's great. But it's also confessing to one another. It's living real life with each other. It's not just part of it.
Fellowship is more confessing, less casserole, right?
That's right.
That's good. Quote that, will you?
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. And I think when you understand that word fellowship and that koinonia and that giving and receiving, and you tie that to humility, it's huge, because you can. I can only be held accountable at the level I'm willing to be vulnerable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's
Right.
good.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've listened, and I've kind of come to this conclusion: accountability doesn't work,
Right.
because I can tell you whatever I want you to know.
Right.
But vulnerability does.
Yeah.
And that's attractive. See, because vulnerability is humility.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's why we look at David and we see the moment of the sin, but God says, hey, David's a man after my own heart. That's interesting. We measure the moment, the snapshot. God measures the real. He measures some footage, right?
Right.
And so here's David who confessed. He didn't play the victim, John. It was your issue. You know, it was, they built the tower too high. I just happened to see Bathsheba. No. What's the deal? It's my issue.
Yeah.
My heart. Yeah.
Right, it's my heart.
Yeah.
And I need help, right?
Yeah.
So,
In a lot of ways, we see accountability as obligation.
yes.
Like, oh, I have to say this because this is what, you know, my pastor told me, or this is what my dad told me, or whatever the case may be. It's like your hand is kind of forced in that. At least that can be the connotation. But vulnerability is an overflow of brokenness
really
or whatever sort of openness that God is doing in your life right there. That's what vulnerability is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I think there's a huge kind of paradigm shift if you change your thinking there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that of course is a high level of trust, where you have brothers, where you have the mentor relationship,
Right.
spiritual father. I mean, Kelly and Kelly can tell me absolutely anything at any time. And it doesn't change my opinion of him. And I'm gonna get down in the trenches with him. We're gonna pray together. We're gonna talk. I mean, there's sometimes I'm saying, okay, Kelly, let me adjust how you're thinking about this.
Yeah.
Right. And I learn great things from him as well. That's that koinonia of fellowship that is moving the kingdom forward,
Right.
and are helping one another.
But at the same time, I don't feel like I have to come forward and say something either.
Right.
So it's not a expectation. Okay, Kelly, every time we talk,
You got to confess
you got to
something.
confess
There
something.
better be a list.
Yep.
And there normally is. You know, it's a long pages. Got
Yeah.
a book of
I've got the
things.
notes right here. No.
It takes a hard
Let's
drive.
go through some of that.
Yeah. But that's
Yeah.
the expectation should not be the expectation should be that the relationship would be authentic
Yeah.
and that it's driven by that.
Absolutely.
And you say in that blog post, actually, back in the first point, you also say our task is to honor each person enough to learn from their lives without passing judgment on them.
Yeah.
So there's an onus on the person sharing and the person being shared with.
Yeah.
To not pass judgment, to learn what you can from either side of that, mentor, mentee, whatever the nature of the relationship is, and to really keep that and honor that in a true biblical good way.
Well, let me speak to that real quick, because this really interesting thing I think can kind of happen in us whenever we talk to somebody, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, and they speak back to us and they say, well, I actually went through the same thing. Two things can happen. Either it can pique your interest and say, okay, well, they survived, maybe I can too. Or the other is, well, if it happened to you, how could you possibly help me?
Yeah.
And that is not the spirit of humility.
Right.
You know, and I know people, and I've been doing this for a little bit, that have kind of had that type of an attitude about this, that and it keeps them from the growth that they need.
Yeah.
So the expectation should be that whoever's in your life, when they begin to speak to you on some sort of issue, step back and rather than judge anything, just learn.
Right.
Be open to what they have to say.
Right.
And that's back to the humility. I'm teachable. I am someone who can learn.
Right.
And I think that's what's really, really important.
Right.
For all of us, it's, but again, it comes back to identity, because I think we have, honestly, I have mentors all around me that while I was insecure, I wasn't reaching out to. Mm-hmm. And I remember one particular guy that he'd been in, long story, but he'd been in my life a number of years before, ran into him at a conference, and he said, hey, why don't you come up and we'll do a round of golf together. We exchanged phone numbers, and I did not contact him for a year. Number one, they have a term for what I do on the golf course. It's called hacking. And
I was going to say, you had to learn how to play golf first.
It's not a smoker's cough, right?
Right.
And so literally, I was so insecure thinking about he's going to see me on the golf course. And if he really got to know me,
Right.
would he still like me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That I alienated myself from a relationship God gave me for over a year.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He became one of my dearest friends, the guy that taught me so much in leadership, served on his church eldership for 15 years, but it could have been even sooner.
Right.
But I think that's that place where I'm looking around hungry and saying, where are the guys, where are those that God is sending me?
Right.
I think that's really, really important, because otherwise we live in isolation. I guess so much I can say about this, because when we isolate, we rage against wisdom, right? Because when I'm isolated, I can be in a crowd and still very, very alone. I mean, how many men today in America are hopelessly addicted to pornography?
Right.
It's a simple, right? Because we understand that's a horrible thing today going on, and they don't even know how to approach the subject and say, Kelly, can you help me? Right. And they're around people that are waiting for that opportunity, because I have found what I confess I can be healed of.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue into that next point of identifying who can be a mentor in your life.
Yeah.
Realize that you need to ask. You need to,
so important.
to be able to ask, to see past that insecurity, to see past what might they think, how might this play out, and ask that once you've identified the right person, to be able to ask them. And you kind of break it down into 3 kind of sub-points, that when you ask, it establishes the nature of the relationship.
Yeah.
It places you at the position of humility, which we've talked about some before, and it honors them.
Yeah.
It gives you a way to honor them by saying, will you come alongside me and help me through this?
It's really good.
I think that's a big deal, being able to ask. That's something that I don't know that I've ever really formally asked anybody. I've learned from a lot of people, and I've had a lot of those relationships that were sort of just a byproduct of being around a person. But that's when I read that, and when we've talked about that some before, that's a big deal, to be able to have even just the courage of like, hey, will you do this? It's kind of an awkward, feels like a weird conversation to have, but it's so powerful, I think, when you can do that.
Very powerful.
So I think
it's definitely a hard, awkward question. It's like, you're in 8th grade and you're that pretty blonde girl, you want to take her to the date.
Yeah, exactly.
How do I
could be turned down here.
Yeah.
Do you like me? Check yes or no.
Yeah. But it's such a powerful thing.
It is.
Particularly if it's a God ordained moment. I find most people who have done something with their life, they want to help people grow.
Yes.
They want to pour, because there's a legacy through a relationship that you can't buy with money.
Absolutely. That's very well said.
And so most people, they want to help people grow if it's going to be worth their time.
Right.
Because let's just be honest, there's a lot of people that might sit there and listen to what you had to say, but they're not going to do anything you say. And that's not worth their time. And one of the things that when you talk to the person, you say, hey, I know this is going to sound weird, but will you mentor me? I need someone to pour into my life. That automatically tells that person, hey, they're serious. They actually want to do this, and on the other side, if you want to mentor somebody, it's just the weirdest thing in the world to say, hey, can I mentor you? And I don't think it's appropriate, honestly. That's just my opinion. There may be some situations there, but I think if you are the mentee or the spiritual son or daughter, just kind of voicing that and having that conversation, to say, I need this. Will you do it?
I agree with that. I think it needs to be initiated by the mentee, the spiritual son. That's the initiated. And then, of course, it has to be reciprocated. Right. In the right way, so that the relationship has that right dynamic of fellowship. But
because the truth is that if I asked you to be my mentor,
Right.
and you simply didn't have the time,
Right.
there has to be an appropriate way to have that conversation and go through that process, because it might just not be able to happen at that point, and it can't be now. Right. Yeah. It can't be a point of discouragement. That mentee, that person still needs to find that relationship.
Right.
But there's a little bit of weirdness on how to navigate that too.
Because we all go through seasons in life, and like if someone says something to me about asking that question and I say, well, not right now, the way they respond determines if it will ever happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. That's a huge deal, because you also need to know, an uncommunicated expectation is
Right.
still an expectation.
Absolutely.
And so John has one idea of what this relationship's going to look like, and I have maybe another one. He's thinking about 8 hours a week. I'm thinking about 8 minutes a year, right? It's a whole different game.
Right.
And so you test that water. I had a great example of a young man that he just begs to meet with me, and I would meet with him. And he's a young man who's, been broken home, sexually active, deeply in pornography, but wanting to follow God, called into the ministry. So I had to test that water. So when he comes to me last summer, hey, I want you to be my spiritual father. Well, what does that look like? And so I didn't answer him. I gave him Dr. Hamby's book.
Right.
4 or 5 months later, hey, I want to meet with you. My first question,
Did you read the book?
bingo. Have you read the book? Well, I'm about halfway through, so I just left him out because I wanted to know how hungry. Are you serious about this?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to waste my time.
That's a big deal.
It's a really big deal. He finishes the book, changes his life, and he said, I cannot wait to meet with you. I meet with him 3 weeks before he's going on a YWAM mission and this just happened 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. He's going to YWAM in Australia for 6 months. He's raised $8,000.
Wow.
Okay. And he sits down with me. I said, and now I understand it. And I apologize to you that I didn't ask you about this trip. I've raised enough money to go, but I will not go if you tell me I shouldn't go. I knew at that moment we can work.
Yeah.
Because he's ready to put his life in, not for me to be a dictator, but he's ready to say, tell me, is this wisdom or not? And of course, I didn't pull the rug out from under him. I said, you should go, but I want to send you off in prayer. Come to my small group. Mm-hmm. Because he had to test it. And had he not read the book, he's flapping his jaws, but he's not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But there has to, because it kind of goes back to that first point. You can learn from your mentees 100%, and you will.
Absolutely.
But the initiation of that all has to come from them, because they're like, at least on the onset of that relationship or those conversations, it comes out of a need that they have that needs to be addressed and filled.
Right.
And you can serve in that role. I can serve in that role. And then through that, we learn about each other. And then the relationship grows and deepens. But it has to start there. That's why it's not appropriate for a mentor to say, hey, I want to mentor you. That will never work. You're not putting that on them. You're not giving them an opportunity to step up to the plate.
Exactly. It's really good. I think that's very good.
All right. And so then that brings us to realize that some of the best mentors in the history of the world are available to you anytime you need them. And again, you're listening to The Point podcast from LifePoint.
This is nice how you drop that in there, John.
Right? Yeah. This can be, but this type of this format of discussion, having a peek into maybe a leader or a church or whatever that you wouldn't have direct access to, or that you wouldn't be able to just go walk up and set up a meeting or whatever. Having so much teaching out there, having so many books, not just on the subject of mentorship, but just on everything. Any topic that anything you could ever think of that you could possibly have going on in your life, there's a plethora of content out there for that. Podcasts, audiobooks, physical books, pastors teaching everything, all kinds of stuff out there for you. I think that's important. Leaders are learners and listeners. You say that in that blog post.
Well, there's really leaders are readers too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to be committed to that continual growth process. And honestly, I know a lot of people struggle to read, and I get it. I'm dyslexic myself, so I understand that. But I'm more curious than I am dyslexic, so I have to read. It kills me if I don't. But whenever we are dedicated to learning and grow, that's really being dedicated to growth. I think that's part of what it means to be a disciple. I think that attitude towards continually growing and deepening your understanding is part of what it means to develop that mind of Christ.
Right.
And so that's a big piece of it. And there's so many great resources out there. Again, I think you need to be careful. I think you need to check your resource out before you jump into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think about the mentors in my life and the people that I've met.
Right.
Almost 100%, I would say, I've been in growth environments.
Right.
So it's been, you say, well, I went to a great conference and I heard some great messages, picked up some great resources. I can look back to the conferences and say, I'll tell you what I picked up there was a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I met somebody that has...
Talk about that with C3. I haven't been yet. I'm going this year. But that the best parts of the conference happen in the conversations that you're having after the sessions.
Absolutely. And you meet these people, you exchange phone numbers, you have like-minded hearts and spirits. Yeah. And so the counter to that is, the average person in America, quits learning at age 18 and spends the rest of their life defending what they know.
Mm-hmm. So that's why they're that's why they're the average person in America.
That's why they're the average person.
That's right.
And there's just such, even those guys that you go get a degree in something and then they never brush up on the degree. They never,
it ends.
It ends.
Stops.
I'm a chiropractor. Well, when have you last studied chiropractor? Well, it's 20 years ago.
Right.
Well, there's a lot has changed.
The failure of every discipleship class. The class ends.
It ends.
But discipleship doesn't end.
And I think and so a life verse for me, my life verse, Luke chapter 2, verse 52. Okay. And Jesus increased in wisdom, and in knowledge, in favor with God and in favor with man. So when I look at that, my Lord and Savior lived in a realm of constant increase. He modeled it for me.
Right.
So am I growing?
What are we doing?
What are we doing? And I think that's really, really important because that's where you get those guys. That's where you meet them.
Well, another part of that is because there may be a few people that are still listening that wanted to turn it off because they think, okay, these guys think I have to read a book or go to a conference or go to a class. Yeah. But there's other ways we can grow too. There's other things out there. You don't have to read a book. Maybe you do listen to a podcast. Maybe you get busy with your hands and start learning how to physically manipulate. Because there's different kinds of knowledge.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But we have to be dedicated to growing in whatever ways that God has shaped us and formed us so we can become what He wants us to be. Mm-hmm. And to me, the failure is not necessarily stopping in education as far as a formal education.
Right.
It would be to stop growing, stop pursuing the things that God still has on the horizon for us to chase.
Absolutely.
That's where the failure begins. It's whenever and I think could be a whole nother tirade, but honestly, when you look at the average amount of Netflix or Facebook that people watch, one of the cool things on iPhones is that they give you that update on screen time.
Yeah.
When that thing first came out, I was like, whoa, I need to dial something back, but to look at that and say, okay, what am I doing to grow?
Yes.
Because we have sacrificed a lot of potential on the altar of self-indulgent entertainment.
That's very true.
And not that there's anything wrong with watching something on Netflix or scrolling through Facebook, but we can waste so much time doing that stuff that we don't develop the relationship, that we don't continue to learn the lessons we need to learn.
It's a question of priorities. What is your priority in this? And I think it's also telling of the mentor. One of our early conversations, you gave me a book to read. In a way, you said, I don't have all the answers, but this might help you.
Right.
That's good.
You gave that guy a book.
Yeah.
Here. Start with somebody else's stuff. I think that's humility in the mentor too, to say, I don't have it all.
Right.
There are some people out there, and you can find that really quick by having a conversation with somebody who they've got all the answers, or they can point you to answers.
Right.
Whether they're their own that they've learned or something they've learned from something else. I think it's
really good, John.
Super important.
I think it's very important.
And I think it's leads into realizing that the best mentors are gifts from God. The ultimate resource, the Bible, the ultimate piece of content out there about all of this stuff, to start there, to seek God first, to honor God through that by acknowledging, hey, this is a gift. This was a
treasure.
Huge deal. Yeah. Treasure. Very, very important aspect of that. Something that sort of encompasses the whole thing, the whole conversation that we've been talking about. It's you acknowledge that Dwayne was a gift to you when you guys met in the bar. Yeah. I'm acknowledging that you're a gift to me through that, it's sort of this cyclical thing. Whenever we're able to do that, we're able to point everything back to Jesus, everything back to God, and say, we give you glory because you are the one who ordained this. I think
I love that because when we understand the source, we then attach the value.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So and I use the analogy, as being, a papa, a grandpa, and I got 7 grandchildren, put that plug in there. Yeah. But my refrigerator, most of our refrigerator, you can't tell hardly what color it is. Right. And you know why? Not only we still have some postcards, Christmas cards and stuff, but most of it has these drawings from grandchildren.
Yeah.
And if you would look at them, they're nothing. You can't make them out. And the reality is they have no value to anybody that doesn't know where they came from.
Yeah.
See, the value gets attached because I know one of my grandchildren drew that.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important to me. Mm-hmm. And so when we recognize they are a gift from God, there's a value that's automatically attached.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that to me is a huge help.
And see, I think that value and that recognizing of that gift that they are from God, it needs an expression, not just an acknowledgement.
Right.
And by that I mean this: we give honor in real and tangible ways. One of those ways is like before we talk, I'll send Dwayne a text and say, "Hey, do you have a time this week? Do you have a time this day to have the conversation?" Because do you know what? Dwayne can't operate on my crisis.
Oh yeah.
Now, have there been times when it's been a crisis and I've been able to reach out and call you because you could?
Yep.
But how arrogant is it of me to assume that just because I'm in the middle of stress or something that you should drop whatever you're doing and come to my rescue? That's not honoring you at all.
Yep.
That's being very self-aware and self-concerned. I think that's one of the things that is so important is not only giving that honor verbally, but giving that honor with their time. The other thing I do is before we go into any kind of a meeting, I prepare. And so Dwayne doesn't know, but I'm on the phone at my desk and I've got a list of questions. These are some things I need to talk to Dwayne about.
Yeah.
And so because I don't want to waste his time.
Right.
Yeah.
Not that talking about, deer hunting and things like we both
that's not a waste of time.
It's not a waste of time, but it's also very much a very clear, you know what? I don't want to waste a bunch of time. I don't want to talk about things that aren't important, especially because you have so much wisdom and so much knowledge that I need.
Yeah.
And so why would I spend time talking about the weather or politics? Good night.
Yeah.
Whenever there's things that really I need help with.
Right.
And so I plan and prepare. I schedule that time and I prepare. If I know I'm going to talk with you, I try to prepare for that. John Maxwell, one of the things that he did to kind of even just get started, and if you don't know who John Maxwell is, you got to read John Maxwell.
Absolutely.
He's the greatest leadership author in the history of the world, in my opinion, outside the Gospels and the epistles and all.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I'm with you.
But what Maxwell did was he would call these great leaders from all over the country, business world, church world, all over the place, and he would pay them like $100 an hour or something like that, which when he did this was a big deal. And he would drive to where they were, they would vacation, and they would meet these guys, and he would pay them for an hour of their time. And he didn't just go in there, blind. He went in there, he prepared, he studied for them. And that's kind of where I got the idea. Now, if I'm talking to Dwayne, or if I'm talking to Dr. Claude Thomas from C3 Global, or if I'm talking to Bishop Miller, anybody, I prepare myself before that conversation even begins, so I can honor their time and honor their wisdom. And the fact of the matter is, if I know there's something particularly that Dwayne has a unique expertise on, something in church life, pastor for many years, pastor of pastors for many years. Why would I waste his time talking about, how to properly, set a volleyball up for a spike?
Yeah.
You probably know how to do that, but that would be a waste of your time. And so it's not honoring to do that.
Right.
Yeah. And that you hit 2 of your 4 points in that other post, maximizing mentor relationships. Plan, prepare, be present in the moment is the third one, and then practice what you get out of that. Practice what lessons you're learning and how you're growing through that. I think that if you guys want a place to read some stuff about that, you should check out those blog posts at kellyrhoades.com. You can just type in mentorship or, kind of search around there. Is there anything else that you guys, any kind of like final thoughts you guys want to put out there?
The whole thing about being present in the conversation is huge, particularly in our ADD society.
Yeah.
Right. It's that we allow our attention to drift somewhere else instead of listening to what you're about to say. I've already got my next question ready to go. I've already got my response.
Right. Waiting for your turn to speak.
You wait. Yeah. You're not present. Your mind is somewhere else.
Right.
And again, a way to sometimes honor that mentor in that situation is like, you know what? My mind is just not here, and here's why. And a lot of times, and Dwayne has done this for me, a lot of times they'll just stop and say, well, hey, let's talk about that for a second.
Yep.
Maybe we don't need to talk about how to increase participation in life groups.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to talk about what's going on in your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Those kind of things are so important and so vital, but it's to be present in that moment. And then that last one really is kind of a big deal. Why take the time to talk to somebody to seek their wisdom if you're not going to do what they say?
Right.
If you already have the answers, why are you wasting your time by asking someone else?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important that we be, and it attaches itself to humility as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I think for me, it would be overcoming the fear of just getting connected. I just,
huge.
When I look at life, I see so many people that could be doing so much more, right? Two are better than one, right?
Right.
And the threefold cord is not easily broken, Scripture says. And so just overcoming that fear and ask. Just get connected with somebody. Open up for more than sports and the weather.
Yeah.
And let's talk about what really matters or what really may be going on in your life. So
seek vulnerability.
Find that right person and open up. And if it isn't the right person at first, don't be discouraged. You said it earlier. Mm-hmm. Find the right one that you can do life with, and now neither one of you are isolated.
Right.
And it may be a brother. It's maybe a peer relationship. That's great. It's a great place to start. Someone you can pray with, someone you can confess and talk to. But you got to take the initial step.
Absolutely.
Well, Dwayne, we are super thankful that you're with us. We really appreciate your wisdom and your willingness to open yourself up to us, to LifePoint, to Kelly. We're very thankful for you as a staff and as a church. I'll speak for everybody.
Yeah.
We're super thankful for you.
We're very honored to be connected. Thank you.
Kelly.
Absolutely.
It's been real.
It's been real. Real what? I'm not sure.
But we hope that to you guys listening, we hope that that this is a blessing in your life, that you get a lot out of it, not just in knowledge that you are acquiring, but that you can practice this, that you can seek out these relationships in your life and seek God first in all of that, and then just give the glory back to Him because He's so good.
Yeah.
Well done, John.
Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for joining us. Yay.
See you next month.
Yeah, see you next month.
Thank you for listening to the To The Point podcast from LifePoint Church. For more information about LifePoint, visit us on the web at lifepointlebanon.com. Be sure to subscribe and rate this podcast, and be sure to share it with your friends on social media. Thanks for joining us for To The Point.